Hello, friends. My name is Barb Walden, and I am speaking to you today from my home in Indianapolis, Indiana. Today is Easter Sunday, a day of joy and celebration for our faith community, and today is also a time of social distancing and isolation. We find ourselves celebrating Easter in a way that many of us have never celebrated it before. Today is a historic day and will certainly be one that goes down in the church history books. It was recently that Wendy Eaton, a fellow church history fan, shared with me a poem that was written by Elbert Smith. It's a poem about Easter, and it's called The Transient Guest. It's a poem that appears as the first poem in a book called Hesperus, or Poems by Father and Son. This is a book of poems that were written by Elbert A. Smith and his father, David Hiram Smith. This particular poem that I want to share with you today was written in Colorado Springs, Colorado. The entire poem appears in the description for this video, so feel free to read along with me. The Transient Guest. Now to and fro the night winds go, and seek and are not satisfied. They seek for him who on the dim for Eastern hill was crucified. He held them still beneath his will upon the troubled Galilee. They wander now on Olive's brow, and unrebuked they vex the sea. The night dew weeps where Jordan sleeps, and in Gethsemane again the moonbeams seek the lowly, meek, great leader of the race of men. They cannot come to his dark room, but when at last the night is o'er, the morning sun gives light to one who seeks her Saviour's lowly door. 'Tis open quite and filled with light, for he has risen up new-born, a transient guest, the first and best, to meet and greet the Easter morn. And now we know the green and low last inn to give poor mortals rest, is brief at most, with God as host, and every man a transient guest. The author of this poem, Elbert A. Smith, knew what it was like to be isolated and separated from the church. Although he was born in his grandmother's home in Nauvoo and lived his earliest years in Plano, Illinois, which was the bustling headquarters of the church at that time, Albert's life took an unexpected turn when he was a child. Elbert was a toddler when he moved with his mother and her parents to a rural farming community in northeastern Iowa. They moved away from the bustling headquarters of the church to a very rural town. There wasn't a congregation in this new community. It was his family that was the center of his social world, his schooling, and his faith. Occasionally they would hear church news from a traveling missionary, but those visits were few and far between. He felt isolated, but he also knew that in his rural life, he was never isolated from Christ. Some of his most powerful spiritual experiences happened when he was alone in the fields and along on the prairie. He called this period in his life, referring to his mother and he, as the isolated saints. It wouldn't be until he was a young adult that he would experience regular contact with our faith community and experience a congregational life. When I think of Elbert A., when I think of isolation, in many ways I'm reminded of the disciples following Jesus' death. Feeling bewildered and lost, the disciples locked themselves in a room and hid. They were full of anxiety and fear during this time. They didn't know what the future had in store for them. The New Testament writers say that the followers were fearful for their lives and sorrowful over the death of Jesus. They gathered in the upper room, reminiscing of the times they spent with him, and feeling as though they had no direction and no spiritual compass on the next step to take in their lives. I find this part of the Easter story one of the more comforting and human sides of the Easter story. How many times we have felt bewildered and scared during this pandemic. The times we have felt isolated and searching for answers to life's most difficult questions. And then Jesus appears to his disciples, encouraging them to touch his wounds, to believe in his story, his mission, his life. I believe that his death soon gave birth to his followers' calling to continue living out Christ's ministry in their lives, to continue his calling even after he left the earth. They soon began working together, living together, eating together, collecting stories and teachings of Jesus and remembering the powerful lessons that changed their lives, with hope that their stories would change the lives of those who do not have the opportunity to learn firsthand from Jesus himself. You see, Christ found a way to appear to those early disciples in their isolation. Christ found a way to appear to young Elbert A. when he was living the life of an isolated saint in northwestern Iowa, in the same way that Christ will appear to us today in our time of social distancing and isolation. It may not be the way we have experienced it in the past, but we must continue to open our hearts and minds for those encounters. Our lives may be changing day by day. We may be forced to readjust during this period, but the one consistent in our lives is the peace of Jesus Christ. So as your day of Easter draws to a close this evening, take the time to reflect on the creative ways you have encountered Christ in your life. As you have huddled in your upper rooms, how has the peace of Christ found you? Wishing you all a healthy and happy Easter.